Welcome back to my video series where I teach you how to fly an FPV, freestyle, racing, acro, drone, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to teach you how to fly it. This video is one in a series. So if it feels like you've dropped in the middle of a conversation, that's why. There is a link in the video description below to the full playlist for the whole series. And if you're looking to learn from the beginning, that's where you should start. But if you're here for the topic of today's video, then let's get into it. At this point in the series, you should more or less be taking off and flying the drone with some amount of intentionality about where you're going. And everybody's going to be in a different place. Some people are going to be much more confident, depending on how many hours of practice they've got. Some people are going to be struggling to avoid crashing and to really go anywhere. But everybody's flying in some sense. So congratulations, pat yourself on the back for that. What I want to do in this video first, at least, is troubleshoot some problems that I've seen people have as they learn how to fly. And unfortunately, because we're not in the same room, I don't know exactly which of these problems you're having and which ones you aren't. So we're just going to have to go through all of them and you're going to have to kind of self-evaluate. And the first thing I want to talk with you about is how you're holding the controller. So there are two basic ways to hold the controller. The first one is called thumbs, where you use your thumbs on top of the sticks to move the sticks. And most people who start out this way are used to coming from like an Xbox or a PlayStation game controller because they're designed with big flat surfaces for you to put your thumbs on and move them. And there are a lot of FPV pilots, very, very successful ones who use this technique, but I think most people agree that you get a little bit more control and a little bit more precision with this way of holding the controller. For the second one, you're going to take your thumb and your index finger, and you're basically going to kind of pinch the stick between your thumb and your index finger. And in fact, that's what this is called, a pinch grip. But when you do it, most people don't like literally pinch the stick like this. Like I'm exaggerating by coming way down to the base of the stick and pinching it. Most people are going to kind of put their thumb somewhat on top, almost as if they were thumbing. And then they're going to kind of bring it just a little off center and bring their index finger in kind of from the front. And that actually is referred to as hybrid pinch. And in my opinion, most people who say that they pinch actually are more doing a hybrid pinch. I have secretly watched people while they were flying and they were in the goggles, and I look down and I see what they're doing with their fingers just because I'm curious. So hybrid pinch is what I suggest you try, even if you don't feel comfortable with it at first. And the reason for that is that hybrid pinch, I think it gives more control to most people. I think you can make more precise stick movements than with just your thumbs alone. And the reason for that is, well, number one, you have 2 points of contact on the stick. So if you're only working with your thumbs and you make a very big movement, like let's say we push the throttle all the way up, to bring it back down again, like it's not going to be as easy to kind of pull it down. I'm exaggerating here. You may find yourself needing to kind of readjust. Do you see I'm kind of lifting my thumb off the stick and kind of readjusting and moving it. And this is something I catch myself doing while I'm flying. I'm not just making this up for the sake of a tutorial. As I'm flying, I'm kind of, and my thumbs are kind of moving where they are on the stick. And eventually my thumb gets a little bit off center. And again, I'm super exaggerating. It gets a little bit off and I have to readjust. And if you have a second finger on the stick, it means, like if you were to watch my hands while I fly, you would see I'm sort of constantly like making little micro adjustments of where my finger is on the stick, and having 2 fingers gives you the flexibility to do that without ever taking your hand off the stick. I also think you can just make more precise and fine movements holding something with 2 fingers instead of holding something with 1 finger. So I'm going to strongly recommend that you try this. And if you are not used to it, if you're used to using just a regular Xbox or PlayStation game controller, it's going to feel very unfamiliar and very uncomfortable. And I want you to give it a shot. I want you to give it an hour of sim time. And if at the end of that hour you still feel, no, this is completely foreign and unfamiliar and I hate it and I'm flying worse, then go back to thumbs and it's no problem. But I think most people are going to find it becomes comfortable after maybe an hour or so of practice, and then you are actually a better pilot as a result of it. Another thing I've seen people do that I want to make sure that you are not doing is this. I don't ever want to see you doing this. Well, I'm not there, so I won't see it, but it's the honor system. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't ever release the stick like that. I see people do that when they're going to do like a flip or a roll, and we haven't gotten to flips or rolls yet, but when they're doing a flip or a roll and at the end of the move, they want to recenter the stick. You should always recenter the stick intentionally. And the two reasons for that is, number one, do you see how that when I do that, it kind of goes at the end? Your drone is going to try to do that. Your drone is trying to do whatever the stick is telling it to do. And if you go like that, microscopically, the drone will try to do that. It's not really good for the motors. It's not great for the gimbals. You know, it's just not good. But the more fundamental reason is that you always need to be in control of the aircraft. You should just move the stick back to center. And if you can't do that, you got to practice more until you can. You need to be doing that intentionally. The next thing I see people struggle with is just how small of a stick movements you need to make in order to control the drone precisely. And for this example, I've got the stick overlay on screen, but I've also got the camera on my hands. And you can see I'm really just barely deflecting the sticks at all. And I'm able to do that because I have a lot of practice of knowing what what inputs I need to make the drone do what I need it to do. As a beginner, one of the things I recommend is that if you're having trouble sort of like overcorrecting, you'll see people will try to make a turn and they'll overcorrect and then they'll have to correct the other way and then they'll crash, right? What I suggest you do is you make half as big a stick movement. So if I'm going to turn, I'm not going to turn sharp like this, right? But I'm going to make a very small stick movement to start that turn. And I'm going to try to make that turn very slowly. And as you can see in this case, that's not going to work out for me and I'm going to crash. But you can start slowly as opposed to starting big and work yourself down to something small. And then once you start to get a feel for what it's like when you're making very small stick movements, you can then start to work it up into larger, faster, more aggressive movements. So you could try just flying straight down the street and making just very small movements to try to fly over the center of the street. If you're focusing on your altitude, you can make very small movements of the throttle to try to adjust your altitude. And if you find that the movements are too big, right, and you're kind of all over the place, just force yourself to make smaller movements. And what's going to happen there is that the drone is not going to respond as quickly to those very small movements, and you're going to need to give it time to respond. So that's going to be my next tip. Unlike like a train on a railroad track where the track curves and the train goes with it, or a car on asphalt where you've got rubber literally gripping the road, with a drone we've got propellers pushing on the air, and the air is slippery. Air is not as grippy as asphalt or metal, because it's compressible, right? That's what it is. So when we put in an input, like if you look right now, and I'm basically flat and level, if I punch the throttle, do you see that there's a delay? From the moment I punch the throttle to the moment the drone begins climbing, there's a delay. And then from the moment I drop the throttle to the moment the drone begins to fall, there's the delay. So if you notice that the drone is climbing and you want it to descend, lower the throttle a little bit and then wait. Lower the throttle a little bit and then wait. Lower it a little bit more and then wait. And then now it's begun descending. And of course, now I've flown all the way off the end of the map. But the point is that you need to calibrate yourself as to just how big of a stick movement you need to be making. And most people coming in as beginners make much too big stick movements. They just overcorrect every time. So make a small stick movement and wait and see if the drone is doing what you want it to do. And train yourself to make those very small stick movements. There is a change in the settings of the liftoff simulator that can help you with that advice to make smaller movements. And to do that, we're going to hit the escape key and we're going to go into the flight controller settings and we're going to change the rates. And what we're going to do is we're going to lower the RC rate to bring the max velocity down. And if we lower this rate, let's just put, you can see that the max velocity comes down, and the lower that number is, the slower the drone will spin, and therefore essentially the smaller your stick movements will become, even though obviously your stick movements are the same size based on the gimbal that you're using on your controller. I can lower this down. I would be comfortable taking this as low as, like, let's say 400 degrees per second is not an unrealistic value. So if I lower the RC rate down to 0.6, the max velocity comes down to 400. And if you're having some trouble with making precise turns, this won't help with the throttle. The throttle is its own thing. But if you're having trouble making precise turns, then lowering the rates, you're not going to be able to turn as fast, but you'll be able to turn more precisely. And so that's something you might try. And again, remember, if you make these changes, you can hit save. Is that going to save it to our blueprint? No, this is my drone. This is the Skyliner. Yeah, so I changed those rates. Is that going to save the next time I load in? We'll have to check that. So now that I've changed those rates, what you'll see is that I can make much bigger stick movements and the drone responds much slower. That's full stick deflection there. And I'm going to have more precision. Now that you've got these tips to help you try to increase your precision, we're going to go to a race course and we're going to try to fly through some racing gates. And I hesitate to introduce this early. I usually don't introduce this early when I'm teaching people to fly in real life. But because I've taught a lot of people to fly in real life, I also know that everybody wants to do race gates, and most people on their own time are practicing race gates, and they're sometimes struggling with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to load up the straw bale environment. We're going to select game mode race or infinite race. Doesn't really matter. Race, you race for 3 laps. Infinite race, you just keep racing forever trying to get the best lap time. So we'll go game mode race, environment straw bale, selected race 01 field day, and we will do today's exercise. What I'm going to have you do is take off, establish a hover, right? And then pitch forward and begin moving forward. And your first challenge is going to be to fly through these gates. Now, some of you are going to do that easily, and some of you are going to find it way harder than it seems like it ought to be. Because one thing I see people struggle with here is they'll get started, and for whatever reason, they'll get started and they're offline. I'm going to exaggerate. You see that right now? I'm way offline. I'm not even going to go anywhere near those gates. And they try to fix that by yawing towards the gates, and that looks like this. So they take off and they're going the wrong way for some reason, and they use the yaw stick and they watch the gate go by. Ah, come back. I wanted to go through you. Remember that the yaw stick changes the direction the drone is looking, but not the direction the drone is moving. Only the right stick can change the direction the drone is moving. So if you find that you take off and you pitch forward and you are not going toward them, don't yaw to look at them, but you're going to roll to try to bring yourself back onto line. Right, so here I'm looking sideways, but I can still roll to kind of get myself through that gate. Okay, I'm going to use pitch to control my speed and roll to control the direction I'm moving. Okay? Eventually, you will come to a point where you're able to fly through these first group of gates. Okay? We will yaw to look through the gates. Remember that just like shooting the gap in the barn in that earlier episode, I don't remember which one it was, if I look at the gates and the gates are offline of each other, do you see that I can't look directly through the gates, right? I want to look down the gates and have them be lined up on line with each other, and that means I'm headed straight towards those gates and I'm going to pass right through them. If I'm high, you can see here I'm going to pass over the gates. Obviously, I can't be low because they're on the ground. But I want to adjust with the roll axis so that I can look through the gates. And I want to be dead in the center of the gates, not here, off to the side. So you're going to take off, you're going to fly through these gates, you're going to do a wonderful job. You're going to continue flying straight through this gate, and you'll come to the first challenge, which is making this turn and getting through this gate. And the first thing that, in my opinion, people do that screws that up for them is they go way too fast. They take off, they pitch forward way too much, and through sheer determination, they manage to get through those first couple gates because they're in a straight line and you don't really have to turn, right? But you're going way too fast, and then as you try to make that turn, you can't do it. You just fall apart. So my advice to you would be that when you take off and you pitch forward only a very little bit, right? And here I'm getting off to the right, so I'm going to yaw to the left just a little bit. I'm going to adjust. Don't worry about the fact that those guys passed you. You're not racing them. You're not going to beat them today. But be going as slow as you reasonably can when you come to that turn. We're going to pitch forward. We're going to control our speed. We're off to the side a little bit, so I'm going to roll a little, just that much to the left, just making those tiny adjustments. As we come to this position, okay? As we come to this flag, or gate rather, and we pass through it, we're going to want to start turning and getting ready for the next one. And the first thing we want to do is we want to be looking at that gate as early as possible. So we want to be thinking one gate ahead. We don't want to just be responding to what's in front of us. So we're going to approach this gate, and at a certain point we're going to realize, yep, I'm going to go through that gate. It's lined up, it's ready to go, and we're going to begin thinking about the next gate. Now I can kind of see that gate from here, right? And I can start thinking about turning to go through it. And the first thing people do is they yaw and turn, and they watch that gate go by. So again, just like before, we're going to need to put in pitch and roll to make that turn. We're also going to need to put in yaw. So as we come through here, we're going to yaw to look at that gate, and then we're going to input left roll to sort of cancel out our speed, and we're going to establish movement in the new direction. So the early way you may begin doing this turn is more like a V, okay? So we'll kind of yaw, and we'll kind of roll to kind of slow down almost, and then we'll pitch forward and we'll go the new direction, okay? But eventually you're going to want to start putting it together into a sort of a smooth coordinated turn. So I'm going to fly through this gate. I'm going to yaw to the left to look at the other gate and try and put it in the center of my screen. And then I know that I'm going to need to roll and yaw to the left and pitch forward in order to establish that new direction of travel. So I'm going to yaw, I'm going to roll to the left, and I'm going to just try to use roll to go through that gate. I'm going to fly through, I'm going to yaw to center it up, I'm going to roll to the left, and then if I need to, I'll pitch forward a little bit to pick up a little speed in that direction. And that's what I want you to work on. Now don't fly around in a circle like I am here. Like I can do this all day. I don't want you, if you're having trouble making this turn, I don't want you like doing what I'm doing here, right? I want you to just hit reset, take off, fly forward, try to control your speed. If you're going too fast, you can level out. Use roll the right stick to center up, and then make this turn and roll to the left, and boom, go through. And that, frankly, is all I'm going to ask of you for today. And if that's very easy for you, you can go ahead and try and set a lap time or whatever. You're probably ahead of the class. But I see a lot of people struggle in their first hours of flight just getting through those gates, getting through this gate, and then making this turn and getting through this gate reliably. So if you can get to a point where you can do that reliably, you are doing very well. And if you can't, that's okay too. Don't freak out. This takes time. Let's see what kind of time I can set. Hey, get out of my face. Get out of my face. Oh, but also get behind me. Get behind me. Oh, I passed him. I passed him. No, I just have to beat them and not crash. Whee. Oh, you son of a... Don't you pass me. Oh god, I'm offline. I'm offline. Oh, stay at high throttle. Stay at high throttle. Don't crash. Don't crash. One good lap. One good lap. One good lap. That was a decent lap, actually. 22s. Oh, that was close. Oh god, I'm too high. Oh man. All right, 22 seconds is my lap time. No warm-up. See if you can beat it. The point of this episode was to try to solve problems that you might be having. So keep practicing the things that we've done so far. Keep trying to refine it and get better and better. If there are problems you're having that I haven't addressed, then I'd love for you to put them down in the comments so I can try to address them in a future video. Before I let you go, can I take a second to remind you that I have a Patreon? Patreon's a website where you can subscribe to me for as little as $2 a month or more if you feel like I've earned it. You choose an amount that you think corresponds to the amount of value you're getting out of my content. You subscribe at that level. Even the lowest subscription is very, very helpful. It does add up, and it means a lot if you decide to do that. If you're watching this, if you're learning how to fly, hopefully I'm giving you some value and you feel like eventually you'll come to a point where you feel like give something back. If that's not today, that's cool. I understand. I watch a lot of creators and listen to a lot of podcasts and don't Patreon most of them. Just the ones that I think have really, really earned it. And I'm just trying to get there for you. Maybe today's that day and there's a link down below. If it is, if not, hey, keep watching. I'm just glad to have you here. Card on screen to the playlist. I'll see you in the next one.